Almighty God, touch my lips and pray that my words may not just be mine, but they all may be touched by your holy scriptures. Now, I was always told to avoid jokes in sermons and avoid congregational participation by my first boss, Father Hugh Moore at St. Alphonse. And he only told me to avoid humour after I tried to make a joke in a sermon. Which told me, avoid that, Father, clutching his pearls. He's a wonderful man. But as it happens, I am going to ask for some congregational participation. Do you know of a movie? Do you have a movie which has changed your life, which has been transformative to you, which has taught you something about life? Do any of you have a movie which you can think of like that?
Gone with the Wind.
That hasn't changed your life, it's just reassured you. They've just confirmed it. Oh, really? What were you going to say? Forrest Gump.
Brighton song.
Really? Oh, now you see, I thought of Dr. Zhivago yesterday, yeah. Marvellous. So in other words, it's a common experience amongst us here that truth can be transported by various media, and that we take that truth in the context in which it's presented. Well, this is something which I think is important, so I'm coming back to it again, and it's something which I'll revisit over the next few months. This business of how we function as people of faith, and how we function as regards the outside world that may not be keen to step into our reality and see the world in the way that we see the world. And how also do we get to be comfortable in seeing the world through the lens of faith and not just through the lens of fact. Now, when I say that, I'm not meaning that our faith is completely based upon fiction. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that we accept the existence of truths that may be separate to their factual accuracy. Now that sounds odd, but actually we all do it. We just proved we all do it, because for us, movies, and I'm sure books and other forms of storytelling, of truth-telling, have been transformative to us, and we accept that they're not factually accurate. In fact, that's a kind of odd thing to even bring up when you're talking about this particular form of media. So the church year, well, we've just begun the church year, actually, at the beginning of Advent. Now, the church year presents all manner of opportunities for us because it has these stories piercing each part of the church year in which we can find ourselves. Now, some of them are festivals like Christmas and Easter, and they're very complicated things. They're not just stories like Aesop's fables, whereby you tell somebody a story to try and satisfy some sort of intellectual curiosity about how things happened. That's not what Christmas is, and that's not what Easter is. We're not telling the stories of Christmas and Easter, or even the stories of Genesis, in order to satisfy intellectual curiosity, because we want to know what happened. That's actually fairly meaningless for most people. That's just like scratching an itch. That's like Googling something because you don't know where such and such a place is. That's not going to change your life. That's not going to change your life. In fact, facts seldom do change your life unless they are wedded with some deeper truth on which you can feed and which can bring you to flourishing. So the church year is pierced all the way through with these festivals which are like living icons. These festivals which are like living works of art. And in the same way in which you can go to an art gallery and you can gaze at a painting and it can have layer upon layer upon layer of meaning for you, and that painting can be something which you keep always close to you throughout your life. That image is something which is powerful to you. So these church feasts and festivals are like living paintings, living works of art, which we act out together, which we ritualize in the same way that human beings ritualize almost everything. But we ritualize these in community, and we draw their full meaning out that we may be fed by it. In the same way as we may gaze at an icon and read the icon in the way that you would read a story. Or we can gaze at a movie and be transformed by it. A very new art form. Something which was sneered at for the first few decades of its life as an art form, but which we now accept that many people gain their big defining life narratives from movies. Well, there is an element whereby scripture is in itself another one of those formats which demands that you take its truth and in the context that it says. So we've begun to understand that a little, so that when we come to study Revelation as a church group, we understand that it's part of something called apocalyptic literature. And we don't read it in the same way as we will read the Desert Sun, because we're not going to get any meaning from it. We're not going to get any richness from it. Well, so it is with Scripture, like Revelation, so it is with our faith. Now, just like many people go to the movies, and they watch the movie, and they are inspired by it, and then they go out and they tell other people about it, and they say what it has done to them and what it has meant for them, and they encourage other people to go to the movie. Those moviegoers are vitally important to the overall scheme of narrative, for the work of the director and the writer and the technicians and the actors. Without the moviegoer, there's no point in making the movie. Without the person who's going to receive the story, the truth which is being presented, there's no point. Well, in the same way, we tend to all see ourselves nowadays as Christian apologists, as people who have to be theologians, who have to be able to expound upon our faith to people who have no interest in learning about our faith, as if we were the experts and have to make an intellectual case for the various parts of our belief system. Well, we don't. We don't. It is perfectly permissible and reasonable and to be encouraged to be a person of faith. And not have to be a theologian, not have to be a Christian apologist, not have to be somebody who knows the be-all and end-all of Hebrew and Greek to be able to expound to a non-believer the faith in terms that they can understand. Faith is another room, and when you step into that room, the lighting is different, the air is different. Describing that other room to somebody who is outside is profoundly challenging, and it's not everyone's gift. For many of us, it is enough, and more than enough, to go into that room ourselves and be transformed by it. To go into that room in congregation, in community, and to live our life, and to be fed there, and to thrive there. We do not have to always describe everything in the words of unbelief. It is enough to have faith. Now, we find ourselves in a bizarre situation when we attempt to describe things like faith and belief. It is a bit like us as moviegoers, and I know this metaphor can only take me so far, but I'm going to bleed it for every last drop. It's as if we are describing Dr. Zhivago to our friends, and we are trying to tell them this extraordinary story that goes on, and the heartbreak in it, and the triumph over adversity, and the various emotions it brought up in us, and they just say, oh, I know that's nonsense, it's not real, it's just on celluloid. That can't have any meaning. Well, we'd assume that these people were very naive and a little ignorant and maybe not quite right in their head. Because we understand that different forms of media have to be interpreted in their various contexts. And the idea of trying to pick holes in Dr. Zhivago because it's a work of fiction is utterly ridiculous. It's comparing chalk and cheese. And yet people do it all the time when we're expounding matters of faith and matters of scripture and matters of religious experience. And there is nothing more difficult to describe to another person than your own religious experience. I think I've described it in terms of those indescribable things which we experience ourselves, but we can't ever tell anyone else about. Now, the most obvious one that I've used in this pulpit is the way we appreciate colour. We will never ever know whether another human being sees colour the same way we do. We have no way of sharing that information. And colour is one of those things which you experience it, and it contains all the information you can ever find out about it. If I look at Mickey's rather fetching shade of salmon or coral today, you know, I can use those words. I can even describe it as hot or cold or, you know, various different adjectives, but it means nothing to you. For all I know, you might be seeing that as I see purple. You might be seeing that as I see sky blue pink with red dots on. I will never know. A religious experience in many ways is like that. You know, it's something that we experience and then we spend the rest of our life trying to explain to others. It's enough to experience it. We find with colour that the way we get around it works for us. The fact that we can't explain it to each other doesn't seem to matter. We still enjoy colour. We still get up in the morning and wear something that matches or doesn't match. We still look at the sunset and enjoy what we see. We are still moved by colours. We still see red as passionate. We see blue as cool. We see green as restful. And yet we can't explain to another living soul what those colours actually are. Well, so it is with something as banal as that. It is with our faith. And it is enough. We can function without ever being able to fully share those things using words. The only way that we can really share them is the same way that we would share the colours of that sunset. We take someone with us and we stand with them and we stare at it together and we share the emotions that it engenders. We cannot take that other person, break open their head and put in what we see. We can never do that. But we can still be glorified and lifted up and redeemed and fed and nourished and transformed and spun around and transported up into the air and changed by what we experience. And that's enough.